It's time for the Jesse T Show. Back on there and everywhere. Yes. It's a Monday in Southern California. Good to be back with you on a Monday. Haven't been on with you for a Monday for a little while. Reconstructing the Monday Jesse T Show. But we are back with you now on the air and everywhere from the community to the world. Good to have you along with us on Facebook.com/Jesse Torero. Also, you can catch us on Instagram Live at Jesse Torero. YouTube, baby. Our channel, Jesse Torero. Today on the Jesse T Show, and on Mondays, we're trying something a little bit new. We're going to be covering one topic every Monday. Something that maybe will help you in your life. Something that perhaps you weren't taught in school anywhere. Something that the powers of the world don't want you to know. Of course, they want to keep you dumb and stupid. They want to keep you fat and sassy, out of shape. They want to keep you distracted and disillusioned. They want to keep you fighting and yelling and screaming and hating and race-mongering and causing havoc. Because in chaos, there's great control. Knowledge is the key to freedom. The question is, do you have the knowledge you need to be free? The Jesse T Show, good to be back with you here on a Monday. We're going to try to give you some knowledge every Monday now to get you free. That's the key to the Jesse T Show. You know me, I'm always a rebel without a cause, and sometimes I'm a rebel with a cause. Sometimes I'm just a rebel and I have no cause, and sometimes I have no cause to be a rebel, but I'm a rebel anyway, because that's just the way I roll. It's me, Jesse T, the Brown Beauty. It's time for the Jesse T Show every Monday through Friday right here from 5 to 6. Right here on our 25. Oh my goodness, 25 now. We grew by 5 more social media TV network sites on thepowerofvoices.com and www.thepowerofvoices.com, and on our global radio network, AM stations across America. Good to have you along with me today. Today we're going to talk about something that's super complex, probably is super boring, and probably just not of any importance to you, even though it should be, and you should have been taught this when you were a wee bit of a youngster, a little lass or lasse, right? You should have been taught this a long time ago. Saying hi to Jeanette Ortega. Hey, thanks a lot, Jeanette. Just starting to chime in with us here on the Jesse T Show. Hey, look at, I just want you to know something. Every Monday, we're going to try to bring something cool, something interesting that will help you benefit, hopefully, for the rest of your life. Because when you have knowledge and you know what those that know that don't want you to know what they know, and you know what they know, then you know something about them. And that's always good to have. Doesn't mean it might not change your life dramatically, but at least you'll know what's going on. And maybe one decision, one little chance of a change because of knowledge that you know can make a big difference in your life or somebody's. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic. And I'm going to reach back here a second and I'm going to get something, everybody's favorite topic. What we're going to talk about today, and I meant to have this out, so I'm sorry. I should have had it out kind of beforehand. What we're going to talk about today, everybody's favorite topic, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. You know what that is, right? What is that? You know what that is, right? What is that? Is that could that possibly be paper? What could that possibly be? What I'm still spreading it out. My goodness. What could that possibly be? The color of money? Money? You like that? Yes? The devil's lettuce. I like that, Michael Foster. The devil's lettuce. But hey, we have to eat the lettuce in order to survive in this world. So I'm going to talk about money and where it comes from. This is going to surprise you because when you know where it comes from and how it's made and how we got to the year 2018 and why we are doing what we're doing, you're going to find out at the end of the show today, not too many minutes ahead of us, you're going to find out why we do the things that we do and we act the way we act because of this. And I'm going to show you that this here is absolutely worthless. Okay? It means nothing. All it is to coerce you into thinking that you have something, but you actually have nothing. Yeah, the plug could be pulled, the carpet could be pulled anytime from underneath you, and no matter how many of these that you have, it won't make a difference. Okay? So we're going to talk about that and why that's true and why that is that way. Oh, wait, I got some more here. Man, I'm pulling money out of everywhere. Wait a second here. Oh my goodness, here comes some more of this. Boy, I got it coming out of my ears today, don't I? I got some more of this here. Wow. Yes, got some. Wait a second. Wait, I think I got some more. Boy, it's just coming out of every envelope. I call this envelope money. Yes, envelope money. Oh, wait, these are some bigger ones. Wait a second here. Wait. I got more. I got more of this because we're going to talk about this, so I might as well show some of it. If we're going to talk about it, I got to show you at least I got some of it, right? I mean, what credibility can I have? Right, Barry? If we're going to talk about money and where it came from and why it's absolutely worthless, let's pull some of these out here. Yeah. We got some of these happening here. We got some of these happening here, and we have some of these happening here. God, I just got money everywhere today. I don't know. But you know something? You see all this money right here? There's a lot of money right here, guys. There's more than I know and not as much as I want. But you see this monopoly money right here? All of this right here, right? Watch. Now you don't see it. Because in about 24 hours, I'm not going to have this anymore. It's going to go away. It's going to be gone. Like a puff of smoke. Right? Goodbye. Just like that. See you later. All gone. So let's talk about where money came from. This is sort of a complex story, but we're going to go way way back in time now. We're going to go far back in time, a time forgotten in the way distant past, before you and I were alive. In fact, just about before anybody was alive living today, unless you're well over 120 years old. This goes farther back, but we're not going to go so far back to like the Egyptian times, though we could. We're going to go back to the Civil War, and we're going to talk about the Civil War. No, I think we're going to go back to the start of the United States of America. That's what we're going to do. Thomas Jefferson. Okay? So, this great country was developed by our founding fathers. And it came about to be just a fantastic miracle place to live. And they twisted a few little things around that they learned from Europe, these first generation Americans, because people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and such, they were all born here in America. Their parents and grandparents came over. So some of them were first generation born here in America. They could date their families back literally to Europe and wherever else they came from. Okay? Only a generation or so before them. And these American men, because there weren't many women involved in the decision-making processes, at least up front. We always know what a little pillow talking does. But, and who really runs the house, right? But the men, our founding fathers, they wrote a couple of really important papers. A lot of them contributed towards the Federalist Papers, and then, of course, the Declaration of Independence, and then, of course, the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, or the amendments to the Constitution, now known as the Bill of Rights. And we elected a president, and Thomas Jefferson was one of our earliest presidents. And Thomas Jefferson, who was a major contributor to all of these writings, though he wasn't the only one, but he's being given the place in history as the one that wrote everything, though a lot of them contributed to different lines and different passages of all these important documents. Thomas Jefferson talked about tyranny and liberty. And one of the things he talked about was a national banking system, a centralized bank. And he was adamantly against this. And it's called the Jeffersonian thought on banking. And the reason why he was against this is because fresh off the boat, just a generation before, they had, of course, the European way of currency and income and taxes. And when rebelling against that, as well as many other things, they didn't want to have, especially Thomas Jefferson, a system that they had in Europe and around the world, because the European merchants and bankers and kings controlled the economy of the planet. So they didn't want to have that kind of banking because it didn't set up for anything that the so-called today middle class could have. You were either born into wealth and an aristocratic family and education, or you never got it. There was really very, very little chance of going from a peasant or a peon to an aristocratic lifestyle, let alone becoming a monarch at all. That just was not going to happen. The system was created for the few and created for the many to be owned, governed, taxed, and to be able to do what they wanted with the peasants and the peons and eons of peons. And our founding fathers were smart in one way. They didn't want us to have that. They knew that they had to give a little extra to our citizens here, the 13 million people that were living in the colonies, roughly, here in America when we broke away from England. So they gave them a little different system that would allow them to be entrepreneurs, that would allow somebody from the most humble of beginnings to become something fantastic. Have the ability through hard work and effort and ingenuity and creativity and shrewd business and banking to be able to move up the scale, move up the ladder of success. All right. So that's how we started. And one of the things, the most important cog to this was to have more access to the power of money than they had in Europe, to not allow the money to be held by a very few, distributed only among the very few. And that's what a centralized banking system that they had in Europe, they didn't want to emulate any aspect of that at all. So Thomas Jefferson wrote some very beautiful passages, and one of the ones I'm paraphrasing is, if you allow a centralized banking system, that is the end of liberty. And tyranny begins at that point. Well, later on, a gentleman by the name of Rothschild, Meyer Rothschild, he basically said this. He said, give me the monetary system of your country and let me control it. I will have no country, and I will own the country and its military. That was much later on. So here we go with the start of this fight between having America become a centralized banking state or free enterprise banking. Well, under Thomas Jefferson's time, that held true. But from the very beginning, the bankers of Europe who came over to America to set up business wanted a centralized bank. Because with a centralized bank, what they can control is the money, the currency, the flow, the creation out of money out of nowhere. All right? I'm going to tell you how they eventually got to that. But we fought against that, and there was always a battle. And it became such a vicious fight that during President Andrew Jackson's time, I think he was a great president. Many think he was a bad president, but without Andrew Jackson, we would never have the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon. So that was one of the great things that he did. We would have never had a passage to the Pacific Ocean, among many other things. A heck of a general. A very, very, very difficult man. They tried to kill him 6 times. They tried to assassinate Andrew Jackson 6 times. And one of the reasons why is because he fought against the centralized bank concept that they wanted so badly to institute during President Andrew Jackson's time, the guy on the $20 bill. They wanted to get him out of the way because he was a proponent against this. He fought against this. And when you read some of his writings, he would not only fought against it, he was willing to do whatever it took to fight against it here in America. So they tried to kill him 6 times. They weren't successful. Then time went on, and it went on and went on, and this fight ensued and struggled, and then the Civil War started, and President Lincoln then, of course, became our president. The president right before Lincoln basically just threw his hands up in the air, and he just basically said, the Union is lost, the country is lost, I don't care what happens to it, it can do whatever it wants, and I don't care. And so President Lincoln became the president, overwhelmingly, by the way. And he started the Republican Party. He was part of the Whig Party, WHIG Party originally. We did have a 3-party system here in the country way back in the beginnings of this country, but very quickly, especially near Abraham Lincoln's time, turned into really a 2-party system. But they were dramatically different at the time. And so at the end of his presidency, when he was murdered and the Civil War was over with, One of the things he did and developed was the greenback, the dollar bill. You can thank the $1 bill for President Lincoln. And he gave the rights of monetary control, currency control, and monetary control back to the states so that the state could print up dollar bills based on the gold and the silver and the commodities and the assets that they had. He gave the control of that back to the states in a free market banking system. They didn't like that. They were pushing very hard. Who was pushing very hard? The industrialists of the time. Vanderbilt, the wealthiest man in America. He owned all the railways in America. Our aristocrats here in America were pushing very hard for a centralized banking system. And Lincoln didn't want it. So that was one of the many reasons why he was killed too. They whacked him out. And it's funny, right after that, the five major industrialists, after the Civil War and the explosion of the Industrial Revolution, took control and started buying government officials. J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, especially J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie. Vanderbilt was still there, okay? Also, Rockefeller came around. Also, Ford came around. Also, Warburg came around. And several others became so wealthy. In fact, when Andrew Carnegie retired at 87 years old and moved back to Scotland, the steel czar, made his wealth with Vanderbilt laying railroad tracks and building skyscrapers, the first ones in Chicago. The steel that he was able to create became the wealthiest man in America and one of the wealthiest men in the world. J.P. Morgan bought him out. And J.P. Morgan was a second generation banker. His father was a banker politician. A lot of folks don't know that. And his father actually negotiated in Europe with the Rothschild banking system the ability to open up the first Rothschild investment company in America. The Rothschilds were a group of people, Meyer Rothschild, who came out of Germany. They were German Jews. They moved into England in the early 18th century, took over the English bank, and became the wealthiest family on the planet Earth today. He had four sons. They went to the four major areas of the planet, and he had a lieutenant that was J.P. Morgan's father here, and of course then J.P. Morgan, who grew up in banking, to control America, and they started doing what they had done to become super wealthy, and that is control the flow of currency and money in the rest of the world. And through the Morgan, J.P. Morgan Chase, they were able to acquire lots of political and lots of wealth. See, J.P. Morgan offered Andrew Carnegie a certain amount of money for his whole empire, and Andrew Carnegie said, okay. Incidentally, J.P. Morgan worked for Andrew Carnegie too as well. So they were all interconnected. When Andrew Carnegie retired, J.P. Morgan became the wealthiest man in America. And it was in banking, not steel making, not timber, not gold, not silver, banking. He owned J.P. Morgan Bank on the East Coast, where all the banks were, of course. And then by 1893, an association of banks up and down the East Coast and the Midwest came together. It wasn't a national bank, but they was like a union. They all joined a union. And J.P. Morgan was at the beginning of that union, the leader of that, which ultimately became the Federal Reserve, the first 9 cats on the Federal Reserve later on. But this is at the turn of the century now, into the 20th century. The Civil War debt was paid off by J.P. Morgan. He walked in and paid off the Civil War debt of America. cash. Now, what do you think that kind of lobby effort created for him? An open ticket to government. They owned both the House and the Senate and the presidency. Year after year after year after year. They got wealthier and wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. The first depression after the Civil War started actually in 1873, culminated in 1893 with this Association of Bankers collapsing the marketplace on purpose so that they could acquire all the banks on the East Coast. And it started in Europe actually in 1873 through agriculture, but they quickly understood that it could happen here. They could bring it here and thus collapse the burgeoning stock market, collapse the banking, have runs on the bank, and that's exactly what happened at the turn of the century. The run on the bank happened on all the East Coast banks, and they couldn't cover their debts. They couldn't cover the assets on the money that was sitting in their vaults to the people who wanted it. So one of the things that JP Morgan did, he went to all these banks in New York, started there, and literally stood across the street and literally said, if you can't get your debts covered there, come over here and I'll pay you 2 for 1. In other words, if you had $1 in gold sitting in their bank, I'll give you $2 worth of gold. You bring your gold over to my bank. And everybody did. Guy was a genius. So ultimately, he acquired almost all the banks on the East Coast and put them under this union and wielded great power amongst the political enterprises. Then in 1913, he decided to go after Woodrow Wilson by placing a president handpicked into the White House. And Woodrow Wilson was handpicked because what they wanted to do is they got tired of having their money at risk. They wanted a centralized bank. That's what JP Morgan really wanted. And so consequently, they created the Federal Reserve, and Woodrow Wilson signed off on it. It was never voted on by Congress or Senate, just so happening. And it went into effect. So in other words, it was never ratified by the citizens. Okay? It's a corporation that runs outside the rules. But the rules were created that allowed this corporation to run because the Association of Bankers owned the government. So you see, corrupt government and banking have been in bed together from time immemorial. But it really got going because of the Industrial Revolution, and the amount of money that was being made is astronomical. Had JP Morgan's wealth been equal to today's wealth, he would be worth something in the terms of $500 million today. Well, the Rothschilds are well over $1 trillion. There are trillions of dollars today in worth and assets. Them and the Vatican, 2 richest entities, 3 being the monarch of England in the world today. Assets and cash. So now we have, in 1913, the creation of an illegal organization called the Federal Reserve, and Congress gave the Federal Reserve what the U.S. Treasury used to run and be in charge of, the control of our monetary system, our currency, our monetary system, our gold and our silver. Gave it to a Federal Reserve was not even belonging to any entity in this country. They have more power than the president. More power. Nobody tells them what to do. They do what they want. When they want, how they want, and whenever they want to do what they want. So in 1913, this was created. American people didn't know, obviously. Their lives really didn't change that much, obviously. But these people got powerful and wealthy. And so what happened then was, in 1917, they got smart and they said, well, why should we be paying all the taxes? Why don't we get money from the citizens and they can pay all the taxes? And we can pay less taxes because we own government, and we'll create legislation that'll pass so that we don't have to pay as much tax, and we have access to all the write-offs to reduce our tax. We have to do it that way because we just can't get a freebie. That wouldn't look good. They would revolt against us. And we'll have the people of America pay the taxes. So they created the IRS. And this happened at the end of President Woodrow Wilson, the greatest traitorous president this country has ever had outside of Obama, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion. These two are the most traitorous presidents ever, for different reasons. But on his parting gift in the dead of night, on his last week out, Congress was gone and the Senate was gone. By executive order, they created the IRS. Not voted on, not ratified, yet another illegal organization. Why not? They did it once and got away with it, so they did it again. So now what we have going on here is we have a complete shift. All the country's wealth, gold and silver, commodities and assets, and the creation of currency and the control of the monetary system of the United States of America given over to one entity. And then all the tax base given over to one entity. And the Treasury Department just becomes a patsy. And the mint just becomes a patsy. And that's how it's been since 1913 and 1917. Okay. Now we have an explosion of income in the 1920s, but an arbitrary crash of the marketplace in the start of the Great Depression. There's a reason that happened. That's another conversation. Because we're talking about how money is created, but I needed to give you this setup so you understand why we are where we're at today. By understanding how this has transpired over the 165, 70 years since the end of the Civil War and the beginning of our country, that is, you can begin to understand why things are the way they are today and why I tell you your money is worthless. It's only worth what they say it's worth. Okay? And they have absolute control. And what spawned this idea, this conversation, I'm getting tired of all this hate mongering, race hatred, this social destruction, slavery this, slavery that, reparations. I'm a slave. I should get paid this. I'm a slave. You're not a slave. You're a slave. You were a slave. You were brought here on your own will. You weren't brought here on your own will. I'm so tired of this talk because let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, each and every one of you are a slave. Each and every one of you are a peon. Each and every one of you are something that they will eat up, chew up, and get rid of by the end of your days and take everything you got. Each and every one of you, we are in this fight and struggle together. And this is one of the reasons why they don't like Donald Trump. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. So now you have the start of World War II and President Roosevelt, FDR. And FDR does a gold run on all Americans. There's a federal law that is put into place and voted on by Congress and voted on by the House and signed by the president, FDR, that all Americans have to turn in their gold. And you know something? In the 1930s, all Americans turned in their gold. They all turned in their gold. So now in the 1930s, if you didn't turn in your gold and somebody snitched on you because you had some gold, you went to federal prison. Because the government wanted your gold. Why? because the Federal Reserve wanted your gold. Why? Because they wanted to create income from your gold. But the real question is, did they really need the gold to create money or income? The answer to that is coming. They just wanted your gold. Why? Because they wanted that precious metal out of your hands, the citizens of America, and into their vaults. All right. So everybody did that. They were given gold certificates that at the end of World War II, you could take that gold certificate, go down to your local bank and get your gold back. And some did, but very few did. They just left it in the bank. And they kept their gold certificate. Now, if you have some of those World War II gold certificates today, they're going to be worth a lot more than, of course, they were when they were originally issued, because gold has gone up so much. About $1,200 an ounce today. But chances are you're not going to turn those certificates over, because most people did not. Then in 1973, President Nixon took us off the silver standard. Did the same thing with, took us off the silver standard. There was one time in this country that you got a silver 50-cent piece, a silver quarter, silver dime, a silver nickel, a silver dollar piece, a Morgan silver dollar. I remember when those were in circulation when I was a kid. A JFK silver 50-cent piece. Remember, I used to take those to school when I was 7 and 8 years old, 66 and 7. This was before the silver standard was eradicated in this country in 73, and they took us off silver. So there's a reason why, because they wanted your silver to create wealth and income, or did they? No. The answer is coming. All right. So now we have the setup. What do you own? Do you own any more gold or silver? Your parents, your grandparents? Chances are not too much. What are your dollars worth? It used to be $1 or a $20 gold certificate, which was a $20 bill. You could go in and get $20 worth of gold with that certificate. Not anymore. It's a reserve note. Reserve note. That's what it is. It's a note, a piece of paper, an IOU, a note. But what backs it? Gold or silver? No. What backs it? Money in the bank? Depositors? No. There's not enough depositors in the world to put into the banks enough cash reserves, reserve notes, to cover the debt the world has. No. What backs it? Gold? No. Silver? No. What backs it? Debt. Now, this is where it gets fun. In 1960, the first credit card was created, and it was a trip card. Pan Am Airways, going against Howard Hughes's TWA, Pan Am created the trip card. Tripp was a guy who owned Pan Am. And he created this card so that you could buy airplane tickets and whatnot if you used Pan Am hotel reservations with a credit card on credit, trip card. And then, of course, all the other credit cards follow. Debt. At the end of World War II, when you came back as a veteran, you were offered the GI Bill, a gift, to be able to buy a house with no money down. A gift. Prior to World War II, you didn't buy houses that way. You bought houses with cash directly from the bank, and you paid that sucker off in 5 years. Otherwise, the bank came in and took your property, your farm, your house, your building. There was none of this extended 15, 20, 30, 40-year debt service. But after World War II, they created the GI Bill. Why? Because there were 6 million GIs that came back, and they were all looking for jobs and education, and they got it. We went from an agrarian nation to a urbanized nation, an industrial nation, and they all wanted to live in a house, but they didn't have the money to buy a house. So the government created the GI loan, no money down, debt that this common citizen had never seen before. They put themselves in debt so that they would have to go to work now every day for 30 years to pay off that debt. Don't pay off the debt, they take your property. And you can't get another one. Slavery to me, debt slavery. You don't have any gold or silver. It's not backed. These dollar bills aren't backed by anything but debt. How is it created? How is income created? Wealth and money created out of debt. I'm going to explain that to you. It's complicated, but it's easy once you understand it. So the credit card, the car payment, debt, debt, debt. And then more debt, and then more debt, and then more debt and more debt. The government creates debt. Corporations create debt. The banks create debt. And debt creates debt, which creates money. Gold and silver. There's not enough gold and silver on the planet Earth to cover the total amount of debt. And it's too much to dig it out of the ground. It's easier to create debt out of debt. And here's why. It's called a Fiat fractionalized reserve money system. If you've never heard that before, I'm going to explain that to you real quick. A very basic explanation of it because it's very detailed and it's confusing. But I'm going to try to break it down and make it real simple. You can go fill in the blanks going on YouTube or Google or whatever, or get a book. Why don't you get a book and read about it? In 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created and the Centralized Bank was created, they understood something because J.P. Morgan put it together and was the first chairman. And his nine guys were all Warburg, and all these cats. They were all the presidents of the different sections of the Federal Reserve. And J.P. Morgan was chairman for life until he died some 30 years later, 40 years later. Okay. The fiat fractionalized reserve system basically works like this. And J.P. Morgan understood this. He basically said, look it, depositors put their money into the bank, and we are able to lend money out equal to the amount of money that's in the bank, and we can charge the interest on that money that we lend out, and that's how we make a profit. So banking rules allowed the banks to lend out a certain portion, not 100% of it, to other people who needed money, like companies and individuals and whatnot, and charge interest. And they made tons of money, but not enough. So they started lending out the gold that they needed more gold. Okay? So they had to have more gold in their vaults because they were lending their own money out and their own gold out. Okay? The depositors' money was being lent out, but they were being charged interest on that money that the bank was lending out. Okay? So as long as there wasn't a run on the bank, the depositors were happy because a small interest was paid them as well to put their money in their bank. But the banks charged more interest to lend that money out than what they gave to the depositors. And as long as there wasn't a run, they were okay. but they needed to lend more money out, and they couldn't lend more than what they had or what they had to keep on reserve. The banking rules were against that. So they confiscated all gold, because with more gold, then they could lend against their gold to other companies, other entities, other individuals, thereby charging them interest on the money or the gold that they lend out, because they could take the gold and turn it into dollars, because gold has a value that was created by the centralized bank, the Federal Reserve. It has a value created by the marketplace, and that value could be lent out to individuals as long as you kept the hard asset of gold in your vault. And that's what they did. But then they had only so much gold, and they had only so much silver. So what they needed to do is they needed to lend your gold out. And that's why they took your gold away from you by federal decree, by law, because they needed more gold. They figured if they had more gold, they could lend it out. And as long as it wasn't a run on the bank, they were going to be okay. All right. Got that? How it works? But then they realized, before 1913, they realized that, wait a minute, we've got to create a system that we can make more money. We can only take so much and lend so much. So if we create debt, and the debtor comes in with a asks for a loan, we charge them an amount of interest rate, right? That interest rate creates debt. Okay, we're going to take that money, okay, and put that in our pocket, but they're in debt now. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to create a debt line, so that in the debt line, in the transfer of debt to debt to debt from bank to bank, we can create money that is beyond the assets. But in order to do that, we have to have the government change the banking rules. And they did. So if a bank puts $1,000 into the Federal Reserve System, they're allowed to get 9 times that money back. So in other words, if they put 1,000, they're allowed to get 9,000 back from the Federal Reserve in dollar bills. Then they're allowed to lend that money out to you who come in and you need $9,000. So they can lend that $9,000 out to you. Their original 1,000 is still sitting in the bank. They get right. They lend the 9,000 to you. You sign a note collateralized by a car, farm property. You sign a note, and then with that money that they're in debt, that money right there, okay, they charge you an interest rate. All right, but that $9,000 was not money they ever had on hand, because the Federal Reserve, through the government, allows them to create $9,000 to give to you out of money they did not have. So now you got money worth what? Worth nothing, because the bank doesn't have to have the gold backing up the hard asset backing up the paper money. They just have to keep a reserve in the Federal Reserve, a ratio that they have to hit. And they continue to do this over and over and over and over and over. So now they have a bunch of people that are paying them loans, interest, all kinds of interest rates, making money on money that they don't have, because they keep their original deposit in the Federal Reserve, and they get a 9-to-1 split coming back, and they do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. You can see and understand how they're creating money out of thin air. So they got the government involved. So let's say the government needs $100 million. The government creates Treasury Bonds, $100 million of Treasury Bonds. The government goes to the Federal Reserve and puts those Treasury bonds up. The Federal Reserve then lends the $100 million, which is not gold or silver, to the government to conduct their business. They go away. They pay a small interest for that. They pay a small interest to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve now has $100 million of Treasury bonds against the United States government. Against who? Against the taxpayer. That's why the IRS was created. The taxpayer is paying off the debt of the money that the government borrowed out of thin air from the Federal Reserve, who's getting the money from you via the government after the government takes their piece of the interest of taxes, and then the Federal Reserve gets their debt service. And what does the Federal Reserve do with the $100 million of Treasury bonds? They sell it to pension funds, to corporations. They sell it to countries like Japan and China. And what do they get for that? They get gold. They get hard asset. They get silver. They get hard assets. So now the Federal Reserve was able to get hard assets out of money that they never had, because the government was able to get money, give them Treasury bonds backed up by the U.S. taxpayer. They can then trickle it through and get hard assets and create gold and silver and timber and whatever the assets are by selling it on the market. Or they can get cash. Or they can get a charge high interest rate. But they get something for it. It's usually gold. It's usually an asset like that. So, wait a second. They just created money out of nowhere. They can do that by federal decree. Okay. Now you understand why your money is worthless. It's not backed by anything. And they can, when they have that control over the monetary system that they've had since 1913 and the currency, then what happens is they can control whether or not you're going to be successful or not. They can control the ebbs and tides of the United States and the world economy. And they've taken that one step farther. They've taken it into the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. So it's just not here in America anymore. It's all the centralized banks around the whole world that are controlled by the IMF, which is owned by the Rothschilds, the Vatican, and the English monarchy, and the Rockefellers. They all have big stakes in that, those four entities. Okay? So they can control wars. They back both sides like they did in World War II and every war and skirmish ever since. They can control politicians. They can control whether you're going to be successful or not, whether you're going to get a loan or not. They can set the rules the way they want to set them based on what they need to get. Now, what is that called? Slavery. Now I'm going to take it one step further. Along comes Donald Trump. Along comes Ronald Reagan. Along comes Eisenhower. Along comes JFK. Eisenhower was a war hero. He could get away with anything he wanted. But he actually was a man for this country. Great president. Not thought about much in history. JFK wanted to evict and cancel the Federal Reserve and the Tax Act, but the Federal Reserve. And he issued an executive order. I think it's 101110. I'll have to post it up. And then he was killed about 2 months after that. A quinkadink? Along comes Ronald Reagan, who understands free trade, who understands capitalism, who understands the open market free system. And then he gets an assassination attempt a year and a half into his presidency. Along comes Donald Trump, who's never been a politician, who is a businessman, who has failed and succeeded, and failed and succeeded. Walt Disney filed bankruptcy 7 times. Ford filed bankruptcy 3 times. Did you know that? Michael Jordan was told wasn't allowed to play high school basketball. He was thrown off the team, wasn't allowed to play. Did you know that one? Einstein was branded as a retard. That's what they branded him as. Failure is a part of success, except if you're a politician, because you can fail and still succeed. Because they duped our society for 75 years into thinking something else. They don't teach this in school. Why? Because if you knew this, like I said from the beginning, you would be out in the streets going after the Frankenstein monsters. Pitchforks and torches. You wouldn't put up with it because it's not fair. It's a one-sided game. And this is the swamp. This is the deep state. This is what Obama, Clinton, the Bushes, Carter, Ford, LBJ, FDR. This is what they were all part of. And all the senators and congressmen. And this is why they don't like Donald Trump. Because he's a businessman. And he's a businessman not just for himself. Oh, he's going to get his come-ups. He's going to get his deal. Hey, look at Obama walked out being worth $160 million after his presidency. I call him Obama Zombie Amba because he acts like a zombie. Trump's already worth more than that, even on the short side. Clinton's worth $170 million. Trump's already worth more than that, even on the short side, despite the system. He understood the system. He worked within the system. He used all the rules against them to prevail. And that's what I want to teach you. That's what I was hoping to show you today. Some information so you could use these rules against them and have your opportunity. It wasn't taught you because they don't want you to know. It's simply that simple. They don't want you to know. Because if you know, you wouldn't put up with it. If you know, you wouldn't put up with it. Nobody would. And if the masses know, there would be upheaval. But Trump is doing his best to clean the swamp. That's why they don't like him. They don't like him because he is making them look at themselves in the mirror and they're getting scared. Because 63 million people voted for him. They're getting scared. They don't like the apple cart upset. They like the good old boys club. And believe me, I don't care whether you're black or white. If you're a politician, you become part of the good old boys club or you don't last long. Okay? It's that simple. You don't last long if you aren't part of the good old boys club. But Trump can afford not to be part of the good old boys club. This is why they don't like him. The globalists and the elitists, the Vatican, the Rothschilds, the IMF Bank, the World Bank, IMF, the World Bank, the Rockefellers, the monarchy, All the other kings and potentates that control the planet by way of income and economy don't like him. And there's nothing they can do. So what's going to happen, folks, is they're going to go along, they're going to fight him every tooth and nail for everything, all the time, and he's going to finish his presidency, be reelected. We're going to have a major windfall in November, pro-Republican all the way. And Trump isn't even liked by the Republican Party because he's really not a Republican. He's a conservative, really, a conservative independent, more like me. He just does the logical, common sense thing, right for the American people. That's all he wants. They're going to go along, fight him all the way. Congress and the Senate are going to be pro-Republican. He's going to get more done. He's going to be reelected. And then what's going to happen is he's going to retire. And then watch what happens. The globalists and the elitists will do the boomerang rubber band effect. Things will bounce back. And within 5 years, we'll be back in the same crap hole we were in before Donald Trump. I guarantee that. Watch what happens. They can outlive him. They can outlive him. But if you understand how money is created, maybe you can get a piece of the action. The Jesse T Show, every day of the week, Monday through Friday, right here from 5 to 6. Good to have you along with me, Jesse T. Every Monday, we're going to try to do a new topic, talk about something that maybe you didn't know or didn't learn in school. You like that, huh? Yeah. Tomorrow, we got a great show lined up in studio. Got a great director, Fusi, coming on in. We're going to be talking movies, baby. Thanking Roger Neal for having us out at the Burt Ward Hollywood Museum Batman 66 presentation over the weekend. Wow, what a lot of fun that was. Check out our interviews with Robin. Holy cow, Batman. Trying to bring you the best of entertainment, information, and just yours truly, the Brown Beauty, who's always on duty. That's me, Jesse T. Podcasting now on YouTube, our channel, Jesse Torero, and Facebook.com/Jesse Torero, and www.thepowerofvoices.com and the Global Radio Network, and 25 other of the very best social media network TV stations. The world, according to Torero, now you're straight on the point. Yo, the Brown Beauty's off duty. See ya!